All right, it is time for episode 153 of the Red Rain Podcast. Let's welcome in our host, Walter Mitchell.
Thank you, Kyle Little Rock Ledbetter. And today we have Marcos Labrada back. He's our wingman these days, particularly when we want to talk about trades and stuff Kyler related and Gannon and Ossenfort. We're going to get into the nitty gritty with Marcos, as we always do. We're going to start with some speculation about a potential Cardinals trade for Hasson Reddick to bring him back to the desert. The Jets have said they won't trade him, but people have said such things before and then turn around and traded him. I mean, I don't think the Patriots really wanted to trade Matthew Judon, and then, of course, yesterday he went to the Falcons. Interesting that the Cardinals were in the mix there, and it looked like it took a third rounder. And I would think that, between the Cardinals and the Falcons going into this season, you would think that another team would think the Cardinals might be a better pick. Hopefully it's not, but that's kind of weird. But I want to get Marcos's take on that trade and what he thinks the Hasson Reddick speculation.
Well, welcome, as you saw yesterday when I made that post on X, there was two individuals in the community, and I swear to you, it was only two individuals. And I can vouch for this because there's video of me actually talking about this, and there's articles of you back in 2020. Right. You wrote articles about Hasson Reddick, how in 2019 we saw the last 3 games, we saw the potential. We saw great games, and the standout game was against the Seahawks, of course, when the Cardinals completely whooped the butts out of the Seahawks who were trying to get a higher seed in the playoff race, and the Cardinals had nothing to play for. Hasson Reddick played a really good game. We saw what could have been like the potential for a good starter. So we always preface that game, the Seahawks game back in 2019, last game of the season. If you guys haven't seen it, go watch it. You guys will see how that team not only dominated both on offense with the run game, but defense really stepped up. And that's when pieces were being moved around. If you want more context to that game as well, the Brett Coleman video, Worst to First, is also one that prefaces that. And it does mention the Hasson Reddick being placed in the Sam role, the Sam linebacker role, was the perfect position for him. Then 2020 came around. We saw him consistently playing well. Obviously went over double-digit sacks. But even after the season was done, beside from the fact that Steve Keim didn't pick up his 5th-year option before the 2020 season came around, me and Walter Mitchell had given more, we were pounding the table to say, look, come on, you guys can't let him walk out. Sign him to a prove-it deal, sign him to another 2-year contract, which is weird because they did that with Zavin. So if you're going to do that with Zavin, you would think for sure somebody's coming out of 12.5 sacks in the season, you'd definitely want to keep him in the building. Steve Keim and I would say possibly from the community also not giving too much importance to someone like Hasson Reddick. I've seen things like, oh, that's a fluke season. He's not going to have another season like that. Well, he's gone over double digits for 5 years now. So I would like to just put it out there that like I said, me and Walter were the ones who were consistent about it. Everybody else is talking about oh, Steve Keim made that mistake. They're talking from a perspective of you guys were part of that. You guys weren't pushing for Hasson Reddick to get signed for extension. You guys weren't pushing for him to stay. A lot of you guys were mentioning 3rd or 5th round pick. Let's get rid of him now, get something for him or whatnot. And Steve Keim obviously is not going to oblige to a community that's going to think, who cares if we can let him walk? We have Chandler Jones. Well, look how that turned out.
Yeah. It's the way the whole thing worked out was unfortunate. I mean, the best part was that Reddick had the big year when he finally had a chance to start in 2020. And by the way, Marcos will remember this. The coaches weren't even starting him at the beginning of the year. they brought in a replacement already from Detroit in
Devon Kennard.
Yeah, Kennard. So Kennard was starting week 1. Hasson hardly even played in week 1. And then Kennard, there were injuries, and Chandler Jones went down, and Kennard had some injuries, and in comes Hasson Reddick, and 12 and a half sacks later, he's a free agent. And that's when Marcos and I were just pounding the table big time for them to make the right move to keep Reddick. And Chandler Jones wanted to be traded. It made perfect sense to do that then, because his guaranteed money was out. And that situation, how it rears its ugly head time and time again for teams. I mean, that's what Reddick's in right now. His situation, his guaranteed money's out, so he wants the contract now, and you can't blame him for that. And if you're going to trade for a guy who wants a new contract, it was part of the deal. You sign him to a new contract. I mean, you don't trade for a guy and then hold him hostage. It's just the way that Jets have handled this has been bizarre, and so I don't blame him for waiting for what he wants in a contract. And there are teams out there like the Cardinals, who I believe should be in the market. And I don't think he's going to ask for, ridiculous money either. He's turning 30. I think the guaranteed money on the Danielle Hunter contract probably is about right. It's in the 20s. And you can put that over a 3-year period. I think if you offered Hasson Reddick $25 million in a 2 or 3 year deal, he'd take it. Do you agree with that, Marcos?
I definitely think he would. He's always seemed to be one of the more humble players that I've seen in the NFL. So I would think that he would not only be open for negotiation for anything that has to do with like being fair market value. He does know what his market value is, because I think I saw a chart where he was since 2020. I think he's like the fifth. As far as sacks is concerned, he's had the fifth most sacks in the last 4 to 5 years or something like that. So that's and you see the per year on those guys that he's with in that company, he's not even touching those. He's 14 mil a year, I think, average, or 15 mil. There's running backs that get paid that much there. Well, I mean, just one. I think there's one more running back. I'm sorry, let me correct myself. But there's like safeties out there that are getting paid more than that and stuff, and that's just sad, because his position, we especially with the person that we had as Vance Joseph, I always mentioned that Hasson Reddick fixes Vance's scheme, because when he has this scheme that has linebackers drop into coverage quite often, he was the one who used to be able to be the guy. He wasn't just a person who got sacks. He's really good in coverage and stuff. So we both talked about that. He started getting better against the run, and it's just sad. But I would think that the Cardinals, if they're blessed with another chance to be able to get this individual back in the building, where he himself has said he has been in full circle when he was here for the Super Bowl. Could you imagine if his career ended with the Cardinals, the same team that just drafted him? I think he would see that as because he's very spiritual too. So he would see that as like some sort of like a sign, like, hey, I was supposed to be here, so I'm here to help this team. This team is on the up and up. Let me help the team that drafted me. And of course, Steve Keim's out of the building. So what does it matter? That's a different general manager.
Yeah, and it just so happens that the coach he played his best football for is now the coach in Arizona. So, and his linebacker coach is the DC in Arizona. So win-win there. I mean, they know now. People were saying, "Oh well, Gannon always just subs in and out his guys up front." Wasn't the case with Reddick. if you go back and look at those Eagles games, Reddick was on the field the vast majority of the time. So he was an exception. The other guys he rotated, like with Brandon Graham, he's getting honor in years, and Josh Sweat and all that. He rotated those guys. But Reddick, he kept on the field as much as he could. I think Reddick had close to 900 snaps that year in Philly.
That's a lot.
So don't be thinking, he's going to play half the time like Xavier did last year. No. Well, he should. And, because we need, this is a defense, as we know, that's predicated on having a good pass rush. And without that, you're hanging your receivers out. I mean, your D-backs out to dry. Fortunately, we have quite the upgrades going on in the defensive backfield, and we're going to talk to Marcos about that in a minute. But this trade makes so much sense, and now that Lawson's gone, was just signed by the Cowboys, the Falcons plucked away Matthew Judon, which, by the way, I bet Judon had some say in that trade. I think he probably looked at the three suitors and said, Raheem Morris, I think I want to play for that guy. And saw, maybe that was the best fit for him. I imagine the Patriots are like that. They kind of work with their guys on where they, if they have options. It wouldn't surprise me if the Cardinals offered a third-round pick, but so did the Falcons, and maybe so did the Bears, because the Bears were in on this too. Raheem Morris is a hot name right now in the NFL, and with the players they're adding down there, it's not a shocker that if he had the choice, that he would pick them. So, but he's gone. And now, the good news is, we saw a kid step up, Xavier Thomas. Marcos, give us our assessment of what you saw from him against the Saints.
That's funny, because he was somebody that really. So this is what I want to say about Xavier Thomas. He reminds me of Marcus Golden a little bit, and not so much about the technique, but about the motor. If you watch this guy in a down basis, this guy runs like he's sprinting. He's not like, doing the normal like defensive end run where you're just running and whatnot. This guy puts his arms up and is like trying to hit the ground with his feet. He's trying to plant his feet on the ground hard to try to get at least a fast sprint. And he does that on every snap. So even if he's in a 3-point stance coming up, or if he's on a 2-point stance going straight ahead, this guy is showing that he wants to, like, his physical traits aren't there for a defensive end. Let's just be real, or for like an outside linebacker. But he wants to show that he's not going to let that be the issue when it comes to him trying to be a good pass rusher. So I saw motor, I saw effort, I saw him giving fits to tackles by hand fighting with them, including on rundowns and stuff, because he wasn't quitting on any type of run, even if he's coming from the backside. So doing that is important when you're trying to pursue the running back, that you're not just giving up the effort, even if it's going away from you, because once you give up that effort, that tackle now can pick somebody else off and help that run either come backside or just pick somebody else and walk somebody else off that could possibly get that running back down. When he's given that tackle fits all the way down to the run, that tackle is not part of the play. And you can have somebody else, like, for example, another person who's a standout for me, DTD, come in and then make that tackle on the running back and whatnot. So I liked his motor. I really hope they not only do they give this guy the amount of snaps for him to develop, but the motor to be able to like play on a down by down basis, the effort that you need to see out there from a defender to be able to show the rest of your team, this is what we want you to do. On a down by down basis, we want you to play hard, and that's what Xavier Thomas showed. So I'm excited for him.
Yeah. He's playing well above his draft, grade already. which makes you feel really good about that, given that they somehow ignored the position in the third round when they had 3 picks. I still don't understand that, but it was almost like they just went into luxury mode. Like, we had a good running back room. We didn't necessarily need a running back yet. Although granted, you look at a Trey Benson, you say, wow, he's special. But there were other special running backs in this draft that you could get on day 3. In my opinion, there were a number of them. But and then with the Isaiah Adams pick, that was kind of a head shaker. You look in the background and you can see how he potentially could be a really good guard in the NFL, but he played tackle last year. And I don't know, people hate it when you talk a little critically of Monty Ossenfort, but I mean, those are the kind of moves you make when you already have an established defense. We don't. I mean, Tip Ryman, love the pick, but not at the expense of us not having a pass rush again. And Bijo Ojulari, unfortunately, now bit by injuries 2 years in a row. And that's really tough. And he was off to a great start, and but we've needed depth there. Now, I'm still really high on Dennis Gardeck. I mean, in playing limited snaps last year, he had 6 sacks. If you play him more, he's probably going to get double digits. The dude is hyper quick, and he's got an array of spin moves back towards the quarterback. The kid's a legit pest off the edge. He's not prototypical, but he's quick and he's sudden and he's got good reflexes to get to the ball. Kyle, have you seen any of Gardeck? I mean, what's your take on Dennis Gardeck?
I think Dennis Gardeck, for the last couple of years that I've been watching the Cardinals, is one of the best cases of player development that you've seen with the Cardinals, because he's someone who goes from being a special team, first undrafted, then a special teamer, progressively adding snaps, and every step along the way has succeeded, and then gets to the point where now he's the captain of the special teams unit, and then ultimately becomes an impact player on defense. I'm glad that he's still around, but I also understand why they've been investing draft capital in the edge rusher position, because so much of the edge rusher position is physical ability. I a couple of years ago, I saw this really interesting article. I wish I could remember who put it together, but it was essentially saying, if you look at the star rankings of high school players who eventually make Pro Bowls in the NFL, on offense, the average comes out to 2 point something stars. It's pretty random who you evaluate in high school that will end up becoming a star in the NFL. And then at the edge rusher position, it's 4.5 stars is the average, because so much of the edge rusher position is physical traits and unique abilities. It's often the guys who are identified as 15, 16-year-olds as great edge rushers that ultimately become great edge rushers in the NFL. It's why a lot of the top picks you think of, the Aiden Hutchinsons, the Myles Garretts, the JJ Watts of the world, were guys who were picked at the top of their drafts. And I understand that part of it. I think it's why, despite the production you've said from Gardeck, it's a little bit undersized, harder to get off the block, especially when he's rushing against bigger left tackles than him. I think that's why he's struggled to find time in the rotation of edge rushers, between Zaven, obviously a former first round pick, and then you go to BJ Ojulari, who they hoped would be a primary edge rusher coming into the season. I've always thought that's been the reason why Gardeck hasn't been given the time to really be a true consistent edge rusher, but everything they've asked him to do, he's shown production at. And honestly, I'm glad that he's kind of the one in line now to replace Ojulari, but if you want to make a trade for a Hasson Reddick, great also. But over the last 2 or 3 years, the big takeaway with Gardeck is just one of the best examples of player development the Cardinals have had in a very limited pool when it comes to like great examples of developing players who are lower draft picks.
Well, and interestingly, the Hasson Reddick dissenters were the ones championing to cut Gardeck last year. I couldn't understand that for anything. I mean, thinking his contract is some sort of albatross, when in fact, Kyle, if you can look up the contract, I think he's only making $4 something a year as a special teams captain. And let's face it, he was our best edge rusher last year. In playing half the snaps, I mean, it was uncanny. I said this to Brett Coleman last week. I had, my friend I watched the games with, sees this because I pointed out to her, watch, every time Gardeck makes a play, they're going to take him off the field. I just can't fathom how you coach someone like that. It's like, oh, that's good enough. Hey, come on off. And so it's very frustrating. I think if you leave him on the field, let him get some momentum, and you build some continuity, that Gardeck's going to be a 10-plus sack guy.
To answer your question, Walter, it's $3.76 million is Gardeck's cap hit for this season, which is actually less than last year, and he will hit unrestricted free agency at the end of the season.
That is a steal and a half. And you want to cut this guy every year. It's just unimaginable to me. But, and plus, I mean, he's shown us something special off the edge. That first year when he came in for Chandler Jones, that was off the charts amazing. I mean, his win rate was off the charts, and his number of pressures per snaps were like record breaking. And last year, I think, do you have PFF go up there, Kyle? Can you look up Gardeck's pressures? I think he was near 50. He had like 49 or something on a limited basis. He didn't even take half the defensive snaps last year. He had six sacks, and I believe it was something maybe in the 40 range of pressures that he generated for the team while I was in there. And so, I mean, that kind of production, that kind of success rate is noteworthy as well,
To answer your question, 6 sacks and 42 pressures last season for Gardeck.
I mean, come on, that's awesome. How many snaps? How many pass rush snaps?
I am efforting to kind of figure that out right now.
That's over on the left-hand side at the beginning. They say defensive snaps, run and pass. So I'm going to guess he had maybe 300 pass rushes.
Let us see.
I'm
trying to find
it. Would you guys want me to show you a visual of like what makes Gardeck special?
Yes.
So this is what I'm going to push for, and I've been pushing for the same thing for Cam Thomas. Put him in the 3-point stance, flare his arm out, make him a Bosa. Shorter, but just as powerful.
Yes.
One of the best things he does, gets under those pads.
Yes.
He gets under that breastplate. Why? Because he's 6'1". He uses natural leverage. He kind of goes in a straight line, pushing against the guard. So the guard or the tackle would be like this. This is Gardeck coming from under. Who's winning that battle? The guy that's lower, of course. So he's got to force tackles to come down. When the tackles come down, he uses that speed to go around.
Correct.
So that's what makes him special.
Or go inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was well said. Yeah.
I was looking for the total number. So Gardeck last year had 510 snaps, which was 46% of the Cardinals snaps.
Yeah, that was total, right? Total snaps.
Yes, 510 total, which was 46% of the total defensive
snaps. Pass rushes would have been in probably the 200s.
Mm-hmm.
Because he also got sent out in coverage a lot. So if you have 200 rushes and you have 42 pressures and 6 sacks, that's dang good. The percentages there would work for anybody. I mean, that's good stuff. So
and the one thing I'll add too is like I understand he's now 30 years old and probably won't get another big contract. He'll probably be a year-to-year guy either in Arizona or somewhere else as the years go along. But if you bring it back to the conversation about Hasson Reddick, it was Chandler Jones, and then it was Hasson Reddick, and then it was Zaven Collins, and they've always tried to address the edge rusher position. I mean, we can even talk Will Anderson if we wanted to. If Will Anderson had been on one side and Dennis Gardeck had been opposite Will Anderson, I think Dennis Gardeck would have had higher production and maybe the defense would have given more snaps. I think it's always been that lack of a second true edge rusher that's always made it difficult for Gardeck to kind of find that role.
Right. So, all right. Now, let me ask Marcos this. Did you get a look at Tyreek Smith in the game last week? I did, and I was impressed. I knew some good things about him coming in from his Ohio State days, and I was always curious to see him play. And I saw, a very active, athletic edge in him against the Saints. Do you concur with that, or did you see something similar?
I need to what was the number on him, because I was paying attention to, so this obviously Darius Robinson, number 56, 54, Xavier Thomas. I think Robinson was 56.
Right.
And then I was paying attention to, and this is on defense, 42 DTD and 28 Elijah Jones, because I'm high on Elijah Jones.
Right.
So what number was
50.
That's 50? Okay, 50.
Yeah.
I think I've seen, okay, so he wasn't. So what because I wish I would have zoned in on him. Because mostly I was zoning in on those guys. Actually, another person I want to tell you about, 96. I like that guy, the nose tackle. Great job, but not too much on.
Yeah.
Yes, I love him.
Me too.
So Tyreek Smith didn't really. It's mostly because I didn't zone in on him. So
right.
But
like you will this week. I know you were going to be locked in on him this week.
Now that you mentioned it, heck yeah, I am.
But I got another thing for you here that I think you might find very intriguing. With Owen Popo popping out,
you did,
and balling big time, and he's got the physical traits that are off. He's a freak. He runs a 4.3. If he's balling like this, how about we move Mack Wilson over to the edge at times, where he actually rushed well for the Patriots last year. What did Mack Wilson have? Like 4.5 sacks, something to that effect. He was a very effective. Be interested to see his PFF pass rushing grade too. I mean, he's sneaky. He's like, you wouldn't look at him and go, "Oh, there's a bona fide edge rusher," but he's got an array of moves, and he's slippery as all get out. So I mean, you have flexibility there. I think. What do you think of that, Marcos?
I think he even had been asked if that would be something he would want to do, and I think Mack Wilson said, "I'm open to being on the edge."
Yeah.
So with these type of players, especially like with him and someone like Zaven, which we want to try to get him moved back to middle linebacker or inside linebacker, I think about like God, I forgot what the old linebacker for the Seahawks was, part of the Legion of Boom, the guy that used to play KJ Wright. The guy that used to send on the edge and then keep him as an inside linebacker. So he was the tweener. So they moved him back and forth as necessary. So I think about that when I think about Mack Wilson. And I think about that when I think about if they want to continue having Zaven at the edge, play him in that kind of role where they just move him from inside to outside and stuff and have these guys rotate, because then that way you can keep them fresh. So I I like that idea. And yes, I will go ahead and co-sign on the Owen Papo thing. I wasn't a big
Yes,
fan of him when we first drafted him. I'll say that. Last year, I was there was a couple games where I was like, come on, man, come on. And obviously I have that sentiment with Isaiah Simmons where I
right,
felt like they slided us with Isaiah Simmons. So
right.
then they shipped them out and they just said, okay, Owen Papo is what you need to go towards. So to me, I'm like, well, there's a talent disparity between Owen Papo and Isaiah Simmons. Don't get it twisted. There's still a big difference, but the traits are there for Owen Papo, and he played really well. Like I mean, oh my God, there was like a couple of stops where he was shading the running back and he
Yes,
missiled towards him. And
he
that was a
did.
great play on a great third down
Yeah,
stop. And same thing, he was starting to get his guidance system going because that was a big issue with Owen Papo coming out of college. He was a heat-seeking missile with no guidance system. Now he's starting to get his guidance system with
right.
snaps. So how about we keep giving him snaps and keep him in that position, let him develop, and you'll have a great linebacker.
Did you see his pick six yesterday?
His pick six
Yeah,
during practice?
yeah, against the
Oh, I
Colts.
didn't see it.
Oh, all right.
I wish I did.
On Revenge of the Birds, I did a highlight thing today. Click on that thread, you'll see all the highlights of the joint practice with the Colts. His popped out. Owen Papo's pick six was a thing of beauty. Went up in the air, got it, and took it in. But
Yeah, no one's catching him.
and you were right. I mean, because he said it after the game in his interview. He said last year, I was learning so much, and when you learn so much, you have to think. This year, now that I know what they expect, I can play faster. And you know what? That's not an excuse. It's the truth. I mean, that's
True.
why you see such a big leap from players from year one to year two. Is once they become familiar, it cuts down on the amount of thinking, and now you can play faster, and that's what he's doing. And he played fast the last few games last season. He had good games. He and Chris Barnes were the best tandem we had all year at inside linebacker, where both of them were clicking at the same time. Um, Kaiser was clicking in some games when, Josh Woods was struggling, and Josh Woods consistently struggling to hold up. And unfortunately, because he's a high effort guy, wanted so bad, but it just wasn't happening. So, but I think using Mac Wilson's versatility is going to be really good. Kyle, what do you got for him PFF wise from last year?
I wasn't able to find the defensive snaps. I only have the free version of PFF, but
Yep.
he recorded 3.5 sacks on, according to a Patriots blogger,
Yep.
about a handful, maybe 20% of the snaps during the season were off the edge. So I would say about 100, 150 at most snaps off the edge. Recorded 3.5 sacks, 4 quarterback hits, and I think it was 8 pressures, maybe 8 or 9 pressures.
All right. And he didn't have that many edge snaps.
No, I estimate about 100, maybe a little bit more.
I don't think so.
It wasn't very many at all. It was maybe it was
like
maybe 3, 4 a game.
Something. Yeah, maybe 50 something.
Because he wasn't starting last year on the Patriots either.
Right.
He only recorded 1 game started.
But once they realized, man, this guy gets home on blitzes, which, by the way, Owen Papo last year, after you saw him blitzing late in the season, he was talking about heat-seeking missile. I mean, he was blowing through there. That's part of his game. That's another bonus. So, but we're getting more athletic at linebacker, which is good. What we need are some thumpers, and Barnes fills that role. And of course, our guy, Zaven Collins, is the epitome of that when you put him in that spot. So whether they ever decide to, you know what, let's get him in there, particularly against the Rams, with what they've got going on up front, it might be a really good thing to do. So, but yeah, I think it would be great to bring Hasson back. The Philly connection there with Gannon and Rallis would be great. And, and so now wanted to ask Marcos, let's stick with defense. Were there other defensive players who popped out to you against the Saints in week 1?
DTD number 42. I
Yeah.
posted about him. There was more snaps. There was one snap that I gave him a little bit of a negative because I was like, come on, man, you gotta go lower, but you're gonna learn. But he's still aggressive and he still comes downhill. There was a snap where he was able to get to the wide receiver in the flat like he got to him quick, but it was either running back or wide receiver, I'm not sure. He went too high on him, got bounced off, but was able to slow the momentum of said receiver. Right. And of course, his team came around and tackled. You can see how he got back up, and he was disappointed at that because he thought to himself, "That was my guy. That was my guy." But that tenacity, he has it. Like we've seen it before. We've seen it with Tyrann when he first got drafted. We've seen it with Budda Baker now recently, and now we're starting to see it with DTD where he almost seems like he's going to be the guy that's like, I know the torch is going to be handed to me. I know that this organization has a rich history in safeties, going from Adrian Wilson to Tyrann Mathieu for a few years to Budda Baker, and now to whoever's going to fill in that spot. And of course, we can't forget about Jalen Thompson, one of the most underrated safeties in the league, who himself is, he's still in his prime years. So I'm not obviously thinking that they're going to replace him anytime soon, but we've all talked about how Budda, it might be a farewell, and it's sad, and I hate it. I don't like it at all. I would much rather have him as a career-long Cardinal and maybe figure something else on another end. But I'm impressed with DTD and what he's done so far with the snaps that he's gotten, and I'm hoping that throughout the preseason they give him a good amount of snaps to be able to get those that learning out of the learning curve that he has to go through. You have to go through it with preseason. And before we end today, I will say something that's going to be kind of controversial about another player who's not playing in the preseason, and a player that probably shouldn't be playing in the preseason. Focusing on usage, but we'll get to that later. That's on the offense side. But sticking with the defense, that's the other guy that I was really impressed with. And of course, I mentioned Roy Lopez. That guy, I love what he's doing at nose tackle. I saw some really good snaps.
Yep. Darren Hall. Wow.
Oh, Darren Hall's number 30, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, he plays with the chip on his shoulder. He is feisty. Yeah. So he has. Oh, go ahead.
Was a 4th round pick a couple years ago, the Falcons, and started a bunch of games his first 2 years with them. And the second year played pretty well. His PFF grade was 65.5. And they just kept drafting corners, and they just let him go. He was on the Colts practice squad last year. Didn't get activated. But I love hungry guys like this. And he's instinctive. So I went back and watched his tape at San Diego State. Oh my God. I mean, whoa, this kid is I think his tape there was superb. I mean, saw pick sixes, instincts, coming up and just nailing people from the edge, from the perimeter. He's just not a blazer, but he's 4.46. I'll take that any day. With you combine instincts with 4.46. He was moving out. He was trucking out there. So that was a pleasant surprise. And then it dawned on me that after Steve Keim spent only 5 draft picks at cornerback in 10 years. Can you believe that? 5.
That's just surrendered.
And we never could find that guy opposite Peterson. The guy who came closest to it was Byron Murphy, except that he came in and the coaches go, no, he's a slot player. Which you and I have argued. If you go back to his Washington tape, I don't know how you draw that conclusion. It almost felt like you didn't do your homework on him because you didn't see him playing left cornerback in off coverage playing it like, a pro at Washington. I mean, he was nailing that position. So McDuffie was a slot all along, not Murphy. Different kind of player, different kind of feet. But, then Brandon Williams was a mistake as a third rounder. All the other three were day 3 picks. Christian Matthew, you might have remembered him, who was a 6th rounder from Penn State. He didn't even make the team. Who else? I can't even. I'll think of it in a minute. But put it this way: only, Byron Murphy was the one that worked out of the 5, and only 5 in 5 years. But now listen to this. So now, look at the draft capital we suddenly have at the cornerback position. 2nd rounders. Sean Murphy Bunting was a 2nd rounder. Max Melton was a 2nd rounder. Michael Ojimeda was a 2nd rounder. Garrett Williams was a 3rd rounder. Elijah Jones is a 3rd rounder. Catro Clark is a 6th rounder. Jaden Davis is a 7th rounder. Then you have Starling Thomas IV, who's emerged and worked his tail off to get to where he is, who was an undrafted college free agent who the Lions signed and now regret waiving, thinking they could get him to the practice squad when the Cardinals came in and claimed him last year. The youth, and I'll include Jadrian Taylor-Demerson in this because he plays the slot as well as any of these guys. So he's a cornerback / safety. He's a 4th rounder, which is still amazing to me because I can't believe he made it to the 4th round, given how he was crushing the combine and given his tape, which is just, you watch that tape, you just go, I want him on my team, So suddenly we have, I was saying this with Brett Coleman last week, we have like 4 or 5 guys now who can cover the slot. Hallelujah. All the guys that Keim drafted, not a one of them could cover the slot. It was no wonder Tyler Lockett, Cooper Kupp, you name it, Demo Samuels, they're just having field days against us. And us playing, silly trying to play zones against them. So this is so encouraging that we've got this youth going for us. I mean, and Darren Hall was a 4th rounder. I mean, and he's showing why. Someone thought of him like, whoa, this kid's got game. I mean, think about it. In 4th round, an early 4th round, which means a lot of thought went into that pick overnight. They were narrowing down their board to pick, he's nearly a top 100 player. So it's just really exciting from that end. And
I think I remember your other 2 corners now. If I remember off the top of my head, I believe one of them is Marco Wilson.
Yes.
And
I can't even forget about him.
The second one, I think, if I remember correctly, is Tay Gowan.
Tay Gowan, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Those are the 5.
Same draft.
Very good. Yeah.
Same draft too. Yeah, that's crazy to think about, huh? That now we have all this capital. We have this position in numbers, and we're just hoping that one of those individuals becomes like either an all-pro or a Pro Bowl starter. At the very least, somebody who can, play well at the position, be somewhat of like a. I don't mean to make this comparison, but like we don't know who Tyson Campbell is, and then he got paid because he was a great player. So we hope that we have somebody like that in our team where, yeah, even though he's not getting the recognition, he's gonna get paid like a top corner because he's that good. It's interesting, and let me talk to you about Catro Clark really quick. So I seen him playing more in the slot.
Yeah,
this is what we're hoping because in all these modern defenses, that's called the apex position. I've seen some really good snaps from him when it comes to busting screens, when it comes to being part of the run fit. Do you think they will keep him at the slot, or do you think they're just jerking him around on there?
Yes.
You think they'll keep him there?
they'll flex him. I love the way he played right cornerback last year in the Rams game, second Rams game. He tied for lead in tackles in that game with 9. He was balling, and he gave up 2 receptions on 5 targets for 8 yards against the Rams. And by the way, they didn't have those chunk yard runs to his side because he was coming up and sticking people. So I like him. I don't like him at left corner. I think he's a little too exposed there, but I like him at right corner, and I really like him in the slot. It depends on the matchup there too, So, I think the slot is a place for him, and I thought you were saying it. I mean, he made that great tackle in the game where he cut a guy in half off a little screen. He's very aware. He sifts through traffic really well. I mean, he's just got the want to and the makeup to do it. And so, yes, I do. The problem that I have with that, though, is that I think the coaches are just really sold on Garrett Williams in the slot.
Yeah.
So, see, my assessment of Williams is I think he'd be an ideal left cornerback. Ideal. He and Elijah Jones. Elijah Jones, too, is better on the left side. Have the makings of a really good boundary cornerback out there. And here's the thing, too, is that I'm not sure of the Murphy-Bunting fit yet. Because it might be that they're planning on playing him a lot in the slot, as Tampa Bay did in the Super Bowl. He's played a lot of slot before. I mean, I could see them when we come and play Cooper Kupp week 2 and Nakua. I can see them matching Bunting up with those two, So I'm not sure in the beginning how much run K-Trell's going to get, but I like him. I like just putting him on the field because I think he's a baller, and I think he's so aggressive. I love that, and I hope they never change that.
He's a screen buster. That's what I love about him. I have about like 3 or 4 clips from last year where he did somewhat similar things, or he was a flat defender and he closed in on the flat like at full speed. And funny, interesting thing about all that is that he doesn't like. I'm not sure if you guys do you know what a T-step is? It's a D-back. It's a defensive back technique where they basically put their foot parallel to the field, so it's like you're stepping and putting your weight and then pushing off of that. Right. He said he's not a person who's particularly specialized in it, but that's because his feet were so quick that like if he did T-step, it took him off of his quickness. So then I started seeing it on film what he was talking about, because when you T-step, you have to put that weight and then bounce off of it. Whereas if you have quick enough feet, you could just take off from where you're at. And K-Trell was doing that because he was able to close in on tackles and stuff, and he did a really good job of that. So I understand what he's talking about now.
Right. I also love this kid, Joey Blount, at safety. And you know what, Marcos, which was surprising to me, but really cheered me up, was, first of all, he's one of our best special teams players. And he was a part of those big turnovers last year. He was Johnny on the spot on those. I think he forced one fumble and recovered a fumble in his snaps there. What was going on? And he sealed the Philly game with the end zone interception, playing free safety. So come Saturday night, the second team safeties, actually, no, because they weren't playing the starters. The guys they played a lot in the early time were the Rabbit and Joey Blount together before Chachere and McKinley and the others came in, which, so I think that's a tip that they see some of the things that I was hoping they would see in Blount, because he looks to me like he's a Johnny on the spot and a rangy. This guy's a heck of an athlete. I mean, he's got length, he's got range, he's got speed, and he's a good hitter. So, man, I'm really intrigued and impressed by the youth that we have in the secondary. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do with the matchups. And I think we're going to play more man now, right? I mean, we played a lot of man in the first game. I hope they stick with that because we certainly have struggled in zones last few years. And I think we got guys to match up. So I think you're encouraged by it as well, correct?
I know that, and this is a question I've always wanted to ask the coaches if I ever had the chance. Are they playing zone coverage so much because of the personnel? And if they did have the personnel, will they start going on into more man coverage? That's an interesting question.
Right.
So obviously we got to look at the last year Jonathan Gannon was with the Eagles, where he played a mix, man matching zones, which is man coverage with zone principles, man coverage, mixed together and stuff. And that's because he had two cornerbacks that were kind of different in specializations. You had one that was a zone corner. You had the other one that was a man coverage corner. So I think with the personnel that you're seeing right now, they probably are going to start calling more man coverage because that's what ultimately what you want to do more. You want to do more of that as a defensive coordinator. You want to call as much man coverage, but you need to do it when you have the personnel for it. So I think with the shotgun approach they're taking to the defensive backs, I think they do want to call more man coverage. They realize the type of people they have. So hopefully we'll see more of that this year because we need to see more man coverage snaps and less zone snaps because zone snaps can lead to confusion in defensive backs' young careers.
Right. Good stuff. Let's shift over to the offense. I'll mention a name. You and Kyle can respond. Started quarterback. I was really impressed with Clayton Tune.
Yes.
Were you?
Yes. Very impressed.
Yeah.
I saved some snaps of him as well. So yeah, he was. Oh my God. I hope that continues with Clayton Tune because we need that backup quarterback to be just as good. If not, it has to be either as good or just as good as our starter because the fact that our starter can't stay on the field all the time means that we live and die by the backup.
Right. I'll be so bold as to say this. Given the three quarterbacks we have, the thing that Tune does the best of all of them is throw over the middle. He is so good at throwing between the hash marks and maybe right between the sort of the alleys. I mean, how about that fourth down connection with Dan? Come on,
the Tiger.
Dan. Yes. Wasn't that a dime? Oh my God. And how he caught it, like right in the triangle, right in traffic. His ball placement between, in over the middle is the best that I've seen. We know that's why we need Kyler to buy some more time and shift his feet and float so he can. And when he does, I think he'll be the best over the middle. But right now, I mean, because of Tune's size and length and his vision, I mean, throwing over the middle is like ba-boom. And I noticed that last year. He was connecting with who was that kid? Jalen Davis, the slot he was connecting with last year. And now this year, he's got it going with Dan. What's Dan's last name again?
Is it like Chisena or something like that?
Dan Chisena. Exactly. Love that kid. He looked the part. He was balling. I think he caught everything his way. What was he like 5 for 5? 5 catches, 5 targets. Nice target on the slot. Excellent movement off his breaks. Physical. And of course, he's a special team stud. So Dan Chisena, welcome to the Cardinals. I'd be disappointed if they don't keep him because, maybe he's got to follow it back up this week. But there was enough there on tape that said that, in my mind, he put on tape what a lot of guys below him haven't. Like, unfortunately, Zach Pascal hasn't been that guy for us. I thought he might be, but he hasn't. He made one nice catch on the sideline, but that's not his game really anyway. He's been a good blocker, but I think Chisena is a better special teams player too. So if you're keeping for Pascal for just blocking and special teams, I think Dan Chisena has more upside. So I think he's making a really good roster case. Chris Moore caught a bomb yesterday against the from Kyler. Or no, maybe it was from Tune. But he caught a bomb yesterday, which was really good. We got to see more of him, but he is a deep threat. So I like him being in the mix there. And, we won't see Zay Jones. Who's the guy on offense that you want to see play and hasn't?
Okay, so it's going to be controversial, of course, but I don't understand why we're one of the only teams, or probably one of the only teams in the NFL, that doesn't want to put out our starting quarterback to get snaps in preseason. Now, I understand what the mindset is, but I don't agree with it because sometimes you need those snaps to be able to develop some sort of chemistry. And there's things you can do to protect your quarterback during preseason. You can call max coverage. Max coverage, max protection. You already know you have a good tight end and somebody who is like Trey McBride and Tip Ryman who can be part of good protection schemes and call things that are maybe like quicker off the ball. But this is what made me upset. I saw Marvin Harrison Jr. for probably one series, and that's in. They yanked him.
3 plays.
What was the point of 3 plays? What was the whole point of having him out there if you're just not? One, you're not going to target him. Two, you're going to have him run a dummy route, a route where he was fully covered on, and then another dummy route, and then, okay, you're out. Why even have him out there? What's the whole point? You're not.
We know the point. What was the point? You know what it was.
Yeah. Hey, guys.
In the seats. It was a total fake out. Oh, Marvin Harris, notice how they announced it in advance. Oh, yeah, we're going to play him. We think he needs to get his feet wet. That was one of the most bullshit token things I've ever seen. It was just a waste of everybody's time thinking that. Now, good for a guy like Dan Chisena to come in there and go, okay, you didn't get MHJ, but I'm gonna show up tonight. I'm gonna give you a little taste of what my game is. And oh man, I totally agree. And here's the thing. I can't believe we're going to go into week 1 in Buffalo and in a game type situation have not seen Kyler Murray throw to Marvin Harrison Jr. being actually pressed and bracketed. So you're going to win that game cold. And yesterday in the beginning of the practice, MHJ was winning pretty well against Kenny Moore, which is no easy feat, against some of the other cornerbacks and stuff. And then they started playing press and doing other things, and they started catching on to the Cardinals. Here's the thing about Drew Petzing's passing schemes and combinations. They're predictable. They were last year, and it's looking like pretty much a lot of the same thing so far in preseason. So, but the good news was that, and Brett Coleman has been discussing this with us, and he even brought it up on his preview of the Cardinals, is will the Cardinals run more motion? Well, yesterday, apparently, from the reports, once they started slowing down receivers with press coverage, and they also made the adjustments on the combination routes that the Cardinals were trying to run, they started using motion, wide receiver motions. And it was effective because it got them kind of off the schneid there, where they were getting kind of shut out there a little bit. So that's very encouraging. But, I've been saying this, so it's amazing how alike you and I always think, because I've been saying this for weeks now. Like, I thought this would be a huge preseason, a huge time to see Kyler get his work in with the offense and really try to galvanize that unit before you go out to Buffalo. And I wrote an article about it, about Super Bowl quarterbacks, winning quarterbacks. Of the 10 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks in the last 10 years, 9 of them have played in the preseason games that year. And not just, in Mahomes' cases, getting like 30 snaps. It's not just a token 3 and out, like, hey, I played. It's to get shit done. It's to, coalesce the group. It's to galvanize the group. And it's to get, football shape. You got to, iron sharpens iron. It's not bad to get hit and to feel like, okay, I'm good with that. You're going to get the first hits out of the way. Why not get that in preseason? Always have the risk of injury, but you always have that in practice too.
Practicing in live games.
But why did Tom Brady, every year he had a chance, play extended snaps in the preseason? And why did Belichick want him to? And if you have the answers to that, I think you have the answers to why of team building. So I totally agree with you. Kyle, what's your thought?
I think the preseason don't play aspect of it from a broader standpoint at this point is something that I kind of go indifferent on, especially in the post-COVID era of joint practices and things of those sorts. I mean, I've heard Kyle Shanahan talk about he thinks joint practices are more valuable than the preseason games. And we've seen preseason games get canceled and teams pick up things like that. So at this point, I think all of the different ideas work in terms of preparation. I think some teams prepare differently than others, but on a broader standpoint, I kind of look at it like each team prepares in their own way based on the coach's philosophy for preparation. In this new era of joint practices and one less preseason game, I think different strategies work differently. From the Cardinals standpoint, specifically, I agree with you in the Marvin Harrison Jr. case. I mean, we know that they're running drills back and forth in practice and trying to build that chemistry.
Excuse me one sec. Talk this out with Marcos. I got to go for 1 second. I'll be right back. Go.
Oh, no, you're good.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm in this in-between space of like, I understand the Marvin Harrison Jr. of it all and wanting to see him play particularly. And with the Kyler case, I think there's a case to be made for both sides. It's kind of, do you think Kyler, even if it's just 2 drives or just the one, the 3 and out drive or whatever it is, do you think that those repetitions would be more valuable served for Kyler, or would they be more valuable served in deciding who the backup quarterback is? Because I think the Cardinals are kind of in this conundrum of who is going to be the backup, who's going to be the emergency third quarterback, and maybe some of those snaps would be better served towards answering that. But again, that's just a matter of perspective more than anything else. I understand both sides of that. With the Marvin Harrison Jr. of it all, it's kind of one of those things where you're right. Like, Walter's right. It was a blatant, we're going to play him, but only for 1 snap or 1 series, just so that we can put butts in seats. That part was obvious enough. But with the quarterback, and I'm curious what you guys think, are those snaps better served, even if it's just 1 or 2 drives for Kyler? Are they better served working Kyler in an offense primarily with second stringers, or is it better served answering the backup quarterback question that the Cardinals have? Because the Cardinals are in the unique position where they don't know exactly who's going to be number 2 on the depth chart come start of season.
No, I mean, even more important, as important as Kyler playing, it's the offensive line.
Yeah.
I mean, we found out yesterday they're getting beat left and right by DeForest Buckner and Latu, the number 15 pick in the draft, who many of us were pretty high on. That's a scary part for me too, because, you know, you look on paper and we got guys in there that look like they'll be the part. But Paris Johnson Jr. hasn't played left tackle since his Ohio State days. You got a brand new left tackle, left guard, and Evan Brown, who played center in Seattle last year. You got Frohl and Hernandez, the only two coming back in their original spots. And then you have Jonah Williams assimilating into the team, coming from now in his second year at right tackle, coming from Cincinnati. On paper, that looks good. In practice, galvanizing an offensive line, and you guys know this, that takes time. It takes tons of reps. It takes the communication. It's so predicated on chemistry. So to just kind of say, oh, well, we'll work this out in organized practices, in joint practices, doesn't cut it for me, because they're not really real game type situations, for one. Down in distance and, this and that. Although they try to simulate that, it doesn't come anywhere close. And, you don't have the really, the threat element on the quarterback. I mean, still, nobody's going to hit a quarterback, right? I mean, and I think that it's kind of expected that running backs, and it's two-hand touch on running backs and wide receivers. So, I mean, I get that everyone's running hard at each other, but the whole point of tackle football is tackling, and what that does psychologically to people. Some people love it and adapt to it. Some people don't. And when it said, okay, live tackling, here we go, it's a whole new ball of wax. It's not a joint practice where you're like, all right, you cover this guy and we'll see what happens. It's so much different. And, I also see it from one other angle, is that, when you single guys out like they did last year, you don't have to play in preseason. What kind of message does that say to the players who do play? Like, we're not all in this together. I mean, that's always bothered me. Back in my day, and I think in Marcos's day too, even, when we played high school football, we had 3 scrimmages in like 10 days before the season. Full bore tackle football, where we, cut our teeth in, getting ready for a season. And it was to galvanize our team and to make us tougher and prepared to go into game one. So it's a sort of an age-old tradition how you get ready to be in football shape and mentally and physically to go into that first game. That it's such a crapshoot. I mean, you said it well, Kyle. I mean, of what to expect if you don't. I mean, I don't know how to think that's going to work, especially when you got a rookie wide receiver, an offensive line where only 2 guys are in the same spot. You got a new wide receiver in Zay Jones, who's been added to the team. You got a new tight end in Tip Raymond. You got a new running back in Trey Benson. So getting these guys all together and out on the field and trying to work this out early also gives you tape that you can sit down and go, okay, here we go, guys. Learning experience. Tape, the tape tells the story. So, Marcos, jump in on that. What's your reaction?
Well, as I mentioned, because a lot of teams, when they do their first team reps, they have their starters out there. They have their they'll have like one series on the first game, second series, or second game is like the dress rehearsal, which is like 2 series deep, 3 series deep, depending on how good your team does. Sometimes if your offense looks like it's chiming, the coach will yank him out sooner. And if it doesn't look like they're getting anything together, he'll keep him out of there longer just so he can get that connection. And I think we mentioned that like Kyler's not, his only time he's ever played preseason was his rookie year. Of course, his second year was COVID. His third year, they completely he was injured. And then when they did have the chance to try to give him some preseason snaps, they decided we're not even going to play him during the preseason. And it's accepted because I know for the majority of the fan base, they think to themselves, there's no possible way somebody can be better at the position, at the quarterback position, because we got our guy. We got our guy in Kyler Murray. So we don't need to trot him out there so he can get injured. But I think about it as in like, well, what's the problem? Why isn't it? If he's our guy, he needs to have the connection with his first team, because when the season comes around, first game comes around, and you have those practices where, yeah, you can simulate things, but they're not going full speed. They're not doing anything where they're trying to win the game. And in a practice situation where they have these joint practices, it is about pride when it comes to like teams wanting to beat each other, but it's not like they're also telling themselves like, let's not get hurt out there. Let's not do something stupid that's going to get us hurt and whatnot. Whereas in a game situation, of course, you're going to go for that play that you need to go for if to win the game. It might get you injured, it gets you injured, or if it doesn't, it doesn't. But you can't do anything in that scenario in a game where, like, if somebody's rushing you off the edge and he has a free hit to you and he hits you, there's nothing you could do about it. Whereas in preseason, you can kind of take that away and be like, no, we're not going to give him any chances. Kyler, I don't care if you are throwing into double coverage. I just want you, we're going to call this max protection play. We're trying to get it to this guy over here, trying to get you some chemistry. We're going to call some short stuff and everything like that. And that way your offensive line can get set on their protection calls. That way your wide receivers can get on the same page, including the one that we drafted number 4 overall. But, after that first game, like Marvin Harrison Jr., 3 snaps, they yanked him, didn't really do anything. And I was disappointed because I was really looking forward to watching film on him. There's not enough to even watch. There's nothing to assess on that. So if they're going to go this direction, which I don't like, then they might as well just take Marvin Harrison out there. Like they take him out if he's only going to be there for 3 snaps. If he's going to play a substantial amount, then yeah, I want to see him play more snaps then. But that was an embarrassment. Like 3 snaps, and I'm like, wait, where's number 18 at? Oh, he's been yanked from the game. I'm like, what was the whole point?
Yeah, well, just for the record, the Kyler's 3rd season, 2021, he played in the preseason. So that was the best season the Cardinals have had in a while. Albeit it wasn't major snaps, but he played. I mean, there's something to be said about being uncomfortable and learning from it. All I hear regard to Kyler is making him comfortable. And it drives me crazy because, I mean, I played the quarterback position. There's nothing comfortable about it. You got guys coming for, every part of your body, every snap. I mean, high school played a team from Harlem, New York. I mean, there were guys out there with no teeth. I mean, these guys were just, big, strapping players. I got hit so hard. I did a whiplash on my helmet when I was throwing a ball. I was seeing stars for like 5 minutes. There's no way, even Patrick Mahomes would say this to anyone. You love the competition, but what makes football so, entertaining is the danger of it. And trying to escape the danger of the game, which is constant. And, that's why I think if you put your teams out there, and Andy Reid seems to think that's a good idea. I mean, some of our fans were telling me Kyler has nothing to prove in preseason. Well, so my answer back was, well, does Patrick Mahomes 2 Super Bowls in a row? Yet he and his coach think it's not about him. It's about integrating the new guys into the offense and getting ready for week 1, which they've done every year. I mean, if those guys think that, why don't we? And that's been my question. Why don't we? Kyle?
Well, I think this is where I go back to there's no wrong answers in this conversation, because some teams have decided if we're not going to play full bore, go all the way with our starters, then it's better to just take the top 15 people out, and then we're going to get more out of this preseason game by figuring out who's going to fill out the rest of the depth chart. It's less about the guys 1 through 15 as it is the guys 15 through 85 that we eventually have to get down to 52 plus however many practice squad guys and things like that, which I understand the argument for that side too, because if people's issues are we're not getting the full bore 100% effort production out of the main players and developing chemistry in the preseason games themselves, you definitely don't get that feeling when it's the backups and the third stringers that are playing, because even if it's a lesser quality of game, because all these people are mostly undrafted 6th round, 7th round guys who are fighting for roster spots, this is their football future kind of thing. And you see that kind of development. And I know you made the case for, are we not all in this together or whatever it might be? And I kind of see both sides of it. We're like, we know this is an unequal system. I don't know if you watched any of the Hard Knocks this year. I caught half the first episode. And after DJ Moore signs his record-setting contract with the Bears, him and Keenan Allen are joking. He's like, when coach says something, I don't have to do it anymore. And they're making jokes and laughing about that. And it's like, sometimes it is kind of an unequal system. And I understand the argument for that as well, is that our time is better served in a preseason game when the pads are up for the players who are fighting for roster spots 23 through 52. I understand that argument as well. It's just different teams have different ideas of how best to use that time. And you bring up the stat that very often teams who play their starters end up making deep runs to the Super Bowl. And sometimes teams who make deep runs to the Super Bowl, like the Rams and 49ers, don't end up playing their starters in the preseason. I've kind of learned in a post-COVID world, it's like some systems work as well as others. But I think your point is fair in the, if you're playing your first teamers all together and the players that you know are going to be in your starting lineup, then awesome, great. If there's some positions like left guard where there is a true competition for who's going to start this year, I think that's where preseason and joint practice reps come in handy. But for the guys who you've already written in pen who the starters are, I understand the argument on the other side, even beyond the like big injury, like what happened to JJ McCarthy, where he goes out and plays and now he's torn his meniscus and now his season is over. Even beyond that, even if the guys haven't felt the wear and tear now, they're going to feel it come week 14 and 15. So kind of the lack of hits and lack of immediate hits that they're taking now might be better served once we get to week 14, 15, and 16, and half the quarterbacks have missed time this year because of injury.
Yeah. Well summarized on both ends. I just love looking at the data. And if 9 of the last 10 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks played in the preseason, I kind of like those odds. I mean, there might be something to that, like, why is that? The only one who didn't was McVay's Stafford. And, that worked out. But it also worked out because of 2 unbelievable trades they were able to make right before the playoffs. Getting Von Miller for 1 and OBJ for 2. And boy, did that spark them. So, but anyway.
Yeah, no, the data is totally fair. I just
the anomaly, But I see it on the other side. The thing is, you can't bubble wrap these guys. Okay, pal. You can't bubble wrap these guys. So,
yeah, I get
one way or the other. The other thing that worries me is whether, if you pay too much attention to injuries, does it become psychological for the team? And I've known coaches who don't like to talk about it, don't like to emphasize it, because it's kind of like we know the nature of the game and we know what it's, we don't have to stress that. What we can do is teach the game so the players are playing safely. Like there's a safe way to tackle. We can emphasize that. There are safe ways to block. We can emphasize that. So, but it's a great dilemma. I mean, and people are going down in these joint practices too. I mean, it's no given that,
the thing I've learned over the years with football is that the torn meniscuses, the torn ACLs, the like big injuries like that are ones that are very often just out of control. Like it's the playing surfaces, it's game scenario where you happen to make that step. It's Dre Greenlaw trying to run onto the field in the Super Bowl and popping an Achilles. It's like those are ones that are kind of out of their control. I think what people are realizing is that if you improve tackling drills and teaching people how to hit or limiting the hits early on, you can reduce some of the soft tissue injuries and obviously the concussions of it all. But I think to your point, football is a hugely violent game and the injuries are going to pop up. I mean, it's often by random chance, right? BJ Ojalare's injury is relatively unrelated to the injury last year, but he just happens to have another knee injury that now puts him out for another season, right? It's just sometimes it's random chance with some of those things. Even the JJ McCarthy of it all. I mean, JJ McCarthy gets injured in a preseason game that very just as easily could have happened in a joint practice or something like that.
It's flukish.
All right, so we
have. Go ahead.
Oh, my bad. And what I do, so this is a question I would like to ask both of you because obviously you guys have different takes on how our quarterback situation has been handled. You, Walter, are more critical. You, Kyler, are more Kyle are more like on the positive side when it comes to like, Kyler Murray, you have more faith in him is what I mean, right? So you think he's gonna. So between both of those, do you think this has to do with more so with Kyler Murray being so injury prone, where they're saying to themselves, we're not even going to chance it. We're not going to throw him out there and chance it because if he goes down, there goes the season. Do you guys think that could be it? Because I believe it's a bubble wrap situation. It's like, let's not get him out there where he's going to get hurt. But then the starters for the first team starters also don't go out there. So what do you guys think?
Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I think it's probably some of that. I haven't been watching the joint practices as closely as you guys have, so I don't know how many like reps he's getting in those necessarily, or how much the first team is actually playing together. I'd be curious just how much they're actually running Kyler, or if they're running, Clayton Tune with the first teamers or something like that. But for the preseason games itself, I think it's one of those cases where they're bubble wrapping a little bit. Until you get to actual game scenarios and when the season starts, which I don't think they have too much to be worried about in terms of injuries. But obviously, Kyler has missed time with injuries at the back end of the season. I know, Walter, you've been saying for years he's never been able to finish a season strong. And so maybe if that goes back to the conversation we had earlier, if you limit the hits, you limit the snaps early in the season, it makes it so that the wear and tear by the time you get to week 14 and 15 and 16 ends up being a little better. But I think if that is the thought process behind it, I think a lot of that is out of the control of the Cardinals coaching staff in terms of what injuries will pop up later in the season.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I understand that, and I don't know. If Andy Reid thinks preseason football is important for team building, I'm on board with that. And obviously, so are a lot of other teams. Super Bowl Bill Belichick I saw him playing starters into third quarters and going the distance, winning Super Bowls. It's one of the reasons why his defense was always so good. They were so well rehearsed. And it takes more than just, there's just so many parts of this. and coordinating the special teams takes practice and this and that. And you want your regular special teams guys out there to get at least a few snaps. But I recognize it's a different world. I also recognize that the NFL is on the verge of going to an 18-game season, which is going to cut into preseason more. It's also thinking of scrapping the off-season activities in favor of coming to camp weeks earlier now, and the camps being more about fitness and training and preparation than hitting for a certain amount of time. I think the whole thing is going to be sort of restructured and revamped to where pretty much every team's going to be doing the same thing. But for now, when you have this opportunity to get out there and play a few series, I think when you come out of it, with things you learned, and I think it accelerates your chemistry. And so I'm still in favor of, but you make a compelling argument, and nobody wants to see Kyler get hurt. Nobody wants to see anyone get hurt. But, that's why you weigh the pros and cons of that. So, but it's an interesting question about Kyler. I mean, here's the other thing is he hasn't played a lot in this new system, and I'll give it to him, even though he had a late start, he finished strong last year, didn't he? So, that's encouraging. And, this last couple games were two of his better ones, put it that way. So that gives you hope that he can, again, if he gets there this year, he can do that. But he was playing well in December and January, when in years past he wasn't doing that well. So we'll take it. All right, so we got 5 minutes left. I want to talk about 3 players. Marcos, 3 players that intrigue me a lot. Marquis Hayes, right guard. What did you see and what do you think? Will he make the roster?
I certainly hope so, because we saw Marquis Hayes have some good snaps in preseason before. Of course, he went down with an injury his rookie year. He has a massive body. Playing him at guard is going to kind of help him out and whatnot and shield him. Of course, he's going to have to play the backup role to that, because I believe Hernandez is still the starter at right guard. But I really hope, because teams need more starting caliber offensive linemen on their team, even if they're not the starters. They need somebody to be able to take over if the starter goes out. So if this guy is a good body in that position, by the way, I didn't really key in too much on him and whatnot, but I really hope they do keep him, because I really do like Marquis Hayes, and I have seen some positive from him before.
Yeah, he had a really good game. I think maybe he was the highest graded offensive lineman of that unit that started last week. The right side was so much stronger. The left side really struggled. And in camp and the one-on-one battles in camp, he's been dominating. And he was yesterday against the Colts in one-on-ones. In pass pro, how they do the one-on-ones, it looks like the bell is rung and the light's on. The only issue is, he's strictly a guard. He doesn't offer you center or tackle versatility on a game day. However, because you have Evan Brown now, that's, he's starting. But if anything happens at center, you can slide him down and you can put a Marquis Hayes in. So, and also you got Tristan Colon, who's a center guard. You got Keith Ishmael, who's a center guard. You got John Gaines II, who's a center guard. So if you could, now the question would be, who's your swing tackle? Because we're only going to keep 8 on game days, the 5 starters and 3 subs. So you need flex. So you need a swing tackle. Right now, I'm guessing that would be Kelvin Beachum, right? And then you need 2 interior players who can swing, hopefully. Or in the case of Hayes, you got him as backup guard, and then you need a backup center. Now, what makes Cologne intriguing is he's played some tackle as well. If you need an emergency tackle, right tackle or something, he could fill in there. So that's my guess, could be that it'll be Beachum, Cologne, and Hayes as your 3 on game days, as your 3 backups. Could work out that way. And that'd be so exciting for him. Here's the one other reason I think you want to try to keep him is with guards getting paid $23 million these days, and Will Hernandez, going into free agency. I don't know if he's gonna. I mean, I imagine his price tag's gonna go way up. That's why I wrote an article where I'm like, extend him now, and he and Frohl, extend those guys, get them done now, and then it'll help you later. But that hasn't happened yet. And, maybe it will. Next player I want to talk about is Michael Carter and the running back situation.
Oh boy, Michael Carter, he is so talented. Even from last year when they picked him up, I was excited about it. I was like, how did they get this guy? How did the Jets let this guy go? And then, of course, we see the big playability. Unfortunately, because of our running back situation, he could be on the chopping block or at least be a pickup for training camp, just a trade and whatnot. We need to keep this guy. This guy's such a proficient, like outside zone runner. He knows how to hit the cutback lane, and that's what you need in an outside wide zone system. You need running backs that can get down and hit every single lane, not just the front side, even the back side. And I didn't. It's sad because Trey Benson, we just drafted him in the 3rd round, but I didn't really like what I saw from Trey Benson last game. And then Michael Carter came in and he started ripping off some big snaps. Even what was that Seahawks running back we got for special teams guy?
DJ Dallas. Yeah.
DJ Dallas. Even he had a big play, and I was confused about that signing because I thought to myself, I know he's a special teams guy, but you can also get other people. But now we have a running back group that is like stuffed, and you drafted a 3rd rounder. So now one of those guys is going to have to be cut. It's going to be, James Conner is going to be on the team. Trey Benson's going to be on the team. DeMarcado, I believe he's still on the team. And if he is, he had a really good season last year with his yards per average, and he was a really good pass blocker for us.
Yes.
So those are all traits that you need. You have your special teamer in DJ Dallas. So what do you do with Michael Carter, who is a smaller guy, but he's a good pass catching running back, a shifty guy, and an outside zone big play guy? What do you do with him now? It's sad because I don't know what to do with him. I want to keep him on the roster. I would think if it was my decision, I would keep him. But the problem is now you have a running back group that's just completely stuffed.
Right. Kyle, any instinct on that? Are you a Carter fan?
I was a Carter fan last year when they picked him up because I remember how awesome he was when the Jets, when Breece Hall went down a couple of years ago. But to Marcos's point, I personally might not have drafted a running back that early, but obviously I understand the state of the running back position in the NFL. You do kind of need to cycle some guys through, but I thought the best unit last year on offense for the Cardinals was the Connor, DeMarcado, Michael Carter running back room.
Right.
And I was hoping that would be the group that came back next year, but that looks like it's not going to be the case because either DeMarcado or Carter is at the very least going to be in jeopardy of being claimed by someone else. I mean, they might pass through to the practice squad, but at the very least, either DeMarcado or Carter is going to, just as a numbers crunch, have to be in jeopardy of getting passed through to the practice squad.
Yeah. So, I like the way you said that. for me, it works. It's not as hard as it looks. If you're willing to realize that you might have made a mistake signing DJ Dallas, given that you draft Benson and now make a logjam out of that running back room. Because first of all, I mean, the first thing is, just last week, what did Greg Dortch say? I don't want to give up my return games. Give me the ball, man. Who are you going to give the ball to? Dortch or DJ Dallas? It's a rhetorical question, right? So that solves that for me. Is it maybe when you signed DJ Dallas, you thought, oh well, Dortch was going to get a bigger role now, so he'll be cool about giving up returns. No. Didn't happen that way. And knowing Dortch, he wants the ball every time he can get it. He's like Deion Sanders. Give me the ball. So, and I love that about that kid. So that helps solve that. Emari Demercado is a lock to make this roster. You know, even in this preseason game, if he was in there with the second team to start that game, it could have gone a hell of a lot different. Did you see the pressure in Desmond Rizer's face the entire first half? That would have changed with Demercado in there, because he takes the lights out. He's as good a running back I've seen come into the NFL playing pass pro as any I've ever seen. Honest to goodness, he is that good. I mean, he stuffs and stones A-gap blitzers like no one I've seen, no rookie I ever saw. And now he's carrying this into the second year. The coaches are all raving about him. Oh, and by the way, he subbing in for James Conner, he ran for 4.9 yards per carry as a rookie. And people are just like, oh, he's expendable. Just get him out of here. Well, no. In fact, he's invaluable if you want to protect Kyler Murray. So that in itself makes him a lock, even if he wasn't as good of a runner, and he's a really fine runner. Benson, you drafted in the third round. You're not going to expose him to waivers. So he's in there. Carter, here's why you keep him. I think I like Marcos's and Kyle's take on Carter. Here's why you keep him, in my opinion. Connor is often getting hurt. He goes for 3 to 4 game stretches where he doesn't play. That's where you're going to need him. That's when in the beginning, you may have him inactive for a few games, but you stash him away, because then you've got multiple options when you can activate Carter on game days. So like we did last year, if later in the season he comes in, he could be doing what he did for our offense last year down the stretch. That's what you want him for. So you stash him away, keep him at the ready. And who knows, in the beginning, somebody might be nicked up like Demercado is right now, nursing a shoulder injury. And coming back from that, I'm hearing he's turned the corner and looking fine now. So that's good. And he was back at practice yesterday. So that's really good. So, yeah, I keep 4. And then I don't think, because of his contract, DJ Dallas is going to get claimed. So you put him on the practice squad. And you can activate him now, do those practice squad things when you want to use him as one of the kickoff returners. And, keep him in the fold. I don't see any problem with that. I think they can keep all 5 that way if they do it that way. I'm with Marco. Carter could get claimed and Demercado could get claimed. I'll tell you who would claim him. The guys he ran against last year, the Ravens. And this is the thing about Demercado. I mean, 3 defenses he's run against in the last couple of years, stout defenses. Michigan, Wolverines, he demolished. in the Fiesta Bowl. I mean, for like 158 yards. It was like amazing against that defense with that talent. Then the Ravens, he had a great game against them, really hard-nosed running, and really, was a bell cow in that game. And they were the number one defense in the NFL last year. And then the 49ers, he gassed them, made them look foolish at times. So, that's a guy I don't touch. You got him under control for the next 3 years. So take advantage of that. So I keep in those four. Last guy, who I find fascinating, is the young receiver from Colorado, Xavier Weaver. As a return guy and maybe a wide receiver 5 or 6. What do you think, Marcos?
Was he the number 30 on the offense?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. He stood out to me. I liked him. Unfortunately, he didn't catch that comeback that he had from Clayton Tune that was so beautiful. But
right.
I mean, he ran that really well. Like he
did.
He knew where to hit the brakes and turn around and play the route properly so that he shielded himself from the cornerback, and the cornerback was scared of his speed. He had to play over the top on him, right, because he was afraid that he was going to get burned over the top. I like him. I heard from the game itself that he was someone who was a standout in practice.
Yeah.
He plays another person that plays with the chip on his shoulder, just like a Hall from the defense and stuff, the other number 30. I want to keep him. And just like you mentioned, like from a kick return standpoint, that is obviously you want to have somebody like that be your kick returner who has shifty ability, but also can take that responsibility while being somebody that's on the roster as like a person who could be, like probably your 5th wide receiver on the roster or your 6th maybe. But he's a depth guy. But we got to remember this was Greg Dortch, like for us for like so many years. He was the depth guy. He was the kick returner when we didn't have our usual kick returner out there. It was Greg Dortch, and now Greg Dortch was given that full time, and now Greg Dortch is given the starter position because he was given the ability to not only show off what he can do during games and limited snaps, but now we have that confidence. We're thinking to ourselves, just give him more snaps as a wide receiver. Let's see what he can do. And hey, if he wants to return kicks, that's fine. But you want to take him off that position. So yeah, I agree with you. We need to keep number 30.
Yeah, and plus you need 2 guys on kickoff return because you can't cover the whole field with one. So you need 2 returners. So imagine Dortch and Weaver in those roles. I kind of like it. I also don't see why you couldn't use Michael Carter in that role. I mean, why not? I mean, with his shiftiness and feet. Here's the thing about Xavier Weaver that I love: his feet. He's got the feet. He glides, and goes right by people. He reminds me a little of one of my favorite. This guy was one of my favorites in this draft was Roman Wilson. The ease of movement and the quickness of his feet are really intriguing to me. And like you said, he didn't fight back for that backside shoulder as well as he could, but that's something he can correct because he's got the quickness and hand to eye to be able to do that. But man, he is smooth, and I mean he's got the pedaling. He's got a pretty special pedal. So I'm very intrigued with him on the back end, and I'm loving Dan Chisena. I mean, he looks all the part to me. I think he could be a real gold mine too, as the backup to Dortch in the slot. Weaver, you can move around. I'd also like to see Weaver used as a running back in situations, like have a speed option with him because he's got wheels around that corner. You could use him in that capacity as well. So Um, he stood out to me, and it's really exciting to talk about young players like this. And I'm super excited to see the game this week. See how we pick up where we left off. I'm anxious to see how they do with these joint practices today. There were some highlights. The early word, gang, from the first day was, the Colts writers were saying that their pass rush was getting to Kyler frequently, but when they weren't, their defensive backs were getting torched and dorched. So encouraging on one end, but and see here again, this is why I want them to play the starting offensive line in a preseason game to get these communication issues. And so much of defensive line is like playing help man-to-man defense, and anyone who's played that in basketball knows there's so much to it. There's so much communication. There's so much, you got to do this now. You got to switch this guy off here. You got to pass this guy here. And there's techniques on how you hedge in basketball. You've got to have your feet right. You have to have your hands right in the right position. Same thing in blocking. All of it's predicated on fundamentals. So, yeah, I mean, there's something about that I think that could really help the team if they could get these guys a little bit of action. It's probably not going to happen. So I'll have to think about that. But I liked the team's effort in game one. Overall, we were overmatched on offense against their first defense. It's kind of embarrassing, because, man, I mean, and that makeshift line on the left side was really in trouble because of the rookie, who's going to be a good player, but he's got thrown to the wolves early, kind of like Clayton Tune was when he was thrown in the Browns game. And he also had a not very good experienced left tackle next to him, Elijah Wilkinson, who, man, missed a whole bunch of blocks. Never been comfortable with him at tackle. So too bad that wasn't Beacham or someone more experienced to trot him out there with. So, but it's really exciting to see the youth on this team. The effort seems, I thought the players played hard. I thought defensively we played more man, and I was impressed with that. And there were fewer like wide open mistake receptions. I was pleased with that. So be interested to see how today goes. Jonathan Gannon said that they're going to see how these practices go to see who plays in this game on Saturday. So hopefully, Kyle, if you get a chance, you can see it. So we can comment on it next week. If you can't, I totally get that. So, I mean, did you see anything of the Cardinals Saints game? Did you get a chance to see
I
that?
didn't watch it live, but I went back and watched a little bit of the game.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch it live though.
Anything pop out to you?
I like Clayton Tune. That
Yep.
that was a nice little pick me up for them. And I mean, we talked about it right off the bat. Xavier Thomas is ideally gonna get some run as an edge this year alongside
Yep.
Gardeck and Zaven Collins, but
Right.
We'll see what happens there. And I've been saying the whole time when we were talking about the cornerbacks, like sometimes it's as simple as just changing up the room that you have. And so my hope for the second preseason game is that we see different players in different spots in the cornerback group for the next game, just to try different things out. Cause I have no idea what they're going to do with Max Melton. Just no idea what's coming at this point. So I hope they try different people in different spots going into the next preseason
I think they
game.
might honor that request because you got Max coming back, Garrett Williams, I think might play. So yeah, I mean, I agree. Let's keep these young guys in there and see what happens and get an assessment of Max and Garrett this week that we did not get last week. So Marcos, thank you so much for joining us again. We can't help making a habit of this. You're hitting home runs here, so I hope Reboot doesn't mind that we're poaching you. But you're, like I say, you've become a wingman. So keep up your great work. Love the film work you do. Any last thoughts from you as we conclude?
Oh well, like as my co-host Blake Murphy, he's always been one of the most supportive and great co-hosts that I've had with this with the reboot, of course. So he never minds like whenever I jump on with you, of course, in the Red Rain podcast, and I'm always honored to come on to the podcast as well, especially now that you've gone through video format, which is it's just awesome. That way,
Yeah.
I'm a visual person, so visuals are always top notch for me. So I thank you guys for inviting me back as usual. And like I said, hey, whenever you need the person to come through, the wingman to come through, I'm here.
Well, we're gonna try to dial up a telestrator for all of us in a future video where we can really get back to. We had so much fun with you doing that without the prompter, but doing some of the film study that we did a couple weeks ago. That was really awesome, and the feedback we got on that was really strong. And so were the hits on that show. It was very popular. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you to Kyle Ledbetter, who's the wizard behind the screen here, the Wizard of AZ. So thanks to him. None of this could happen without him. And for Cardinal fans, I hope you enjoy this week's game. And as there were very enjoyable moments last week, and let's see if we can go out of Indy with a little win this time. That would be kind of fun. So have a great week. And in the interim, may the red rain shower down on you into a red sea. Red rain.